So hey there fellow YouTubers, it's Frank Bush here again. So in the last video I had the good people over at ALLPOWERS sent me off this R600 unit here, and I did a full kind of detailed review of that just in its own standalone kind of use, yeah? So, but over the last couple videos, I've done review videos on some of the LiTime batteries, like you say, the ALLPOWERS stuff. I want to show simple ways that I kind of have developed now that I can combine all these things together to get way more functionality out of it. You know, generally speaking, a small unit like the R600 isn't capable of kind of cooking meals off for people and that kind of stuff. You know, it's a small, compact, ultra lightweight unit and that kind of thing, right? But in this video, I'm going to walk through the steps of how to expand it out and connect it up to these batteries, and then have the batteries running a 24-volt system instead of a 12, and connecting that up to some solar panels and all that kind of stuff to show you how you can really kind of advance the functionality of being able to use some of these smaller components and get really kind of extensive use out of them, yeah? So if you're interested in that kind of content, stay tuned. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take these two batteries. These are 12 volts, 100 ampere hour batteries. This is the Bluetooth ones. I've got two of them, and just going to make sure I tighten down the cable here in the back. And then so what I've done, I've just connected these together in series now. So I've taken the negative off the first battery and connected it to the positive on the second. Then I kind of flip the batteries around to have just these two terminals out. And this will be 24-volt system now that we're working with, yeah? So really simple, just attach that cable, wired them up in series, and now we're up to the 24-volt. So the next step will be, I'm going to hook in just a little solar charge controller here. I'm going to connect this up to the positive and to the negative on the terminals, and get it ready that we can hook up a solar panel to it so that we can start taking a charge from the sun, yeah? So I'll just come in and do a little close-up on this little solar charge controller. So I'm not, you know, promoting any brands or anything in this video. This is a PWM charge controller. It can handle between 12 to 24 volt batteries that it's connecting to, and it can handle up to 20 amps. So when it comes to charge controllers, there's some of them that can handle lithium iron phosphate batteries, which is what these ones are, and there's some that can't. So if you're kind of brand new into this stuff, be mindful if you're picking up one of these solar charge controllers that you get one that is capable to hook into the battery chemistry that's, you know, you're working with and that kind of stuff. So if it's lithium iron phosphate, just make sure you get one that kind of works with lithium iron phosphate chemistry, or you won't get ideal charging into those batteries and that, yeah? I just figured I'd mention that as a side note. So the way these little units work though, they're pretty simple. They've got two wires that come off now, and they just go out to MC4 connections, which will connect on to the solar panels. So, you know, you got a positive and a negative there, if you will. The male's the positive, the female's the negative, that kind of thing. And then I've got the two connections that'll connect off to the battery. The red's the positive, the black's the negative, you know, standard kind of stuff, yeah? And then there's some settings that you can set in here to just toggle between what type of battery chemistry you're using, and, you know, what voltage are you connecting up to and all that kind of stuff. So I'll stop and show that part, and then I want to hook all my wiring up at one shot just to make it quick. So I'll stop and show you one other component now separate from this that I've made. So I'll just yard this out of here and bring that in, and I'll talk about kind of how I connect these batteries now, how I'm going to end up hooking this 24-volt system up to that R600 solar generator that I reviewed in the previous video, yeah? So just give me 2 seconds and I'll kind of reposition things and I'll cut back. Okay, so this here is just a little wiring setup that I did to kind of hook up the batteries to the generator and that kind of stuff, yeah? And all I did was wired up an XT60 connection, as you can see is written on the side here, and just wired that up on the one end, and on the other end I just put on two ring terminals where I can hook them onto the battery with ease, yeah? So nothing complicated here, just a simple wire where it gets me out to that XT60 connection. That's really the critical bit right there, yeah? And you can buy these pre-made off eBay or Amazon, that kind of stuff. I just made them because I had the parts readily available sitting around my house, right? So one way or the other, I'll start to hook up the positive and negative of the solar charge controller and of this wire just up to the positive and negative on the 24-volt battery stack we have here, so we can move on to the next step, yeah? Okay, so I just hooked up those couple wires up to the terminals, yeah? Like I say, all the positives to the positive, negatives to the negative. Now you don't want to go beyond 3 connections to a terminal like this. If you get into more complex wiring systems and you need to connect more than 3, then you're better off to connect to a fuse block and then go out to that. And I've shown how to do that in previous videos, but one way or the other, I now have my solar charge controller, and I just went and changed the settings so that it's working for a 24 volt system. I had it set on 12 volt, but as you can see, it's lighting up. It's showing that there's nothing coming in yet. You know, I've got 0 amps, 0 volts, because I don't have the solar panel hooked up yet. We'll do that as next step. And then, like I say, I just connected on this XT60 connection, and that's just, you know, ready to go to hook onto the solar generator, the R600 there. But one way or the other, I'm just going to quickly stop now and connect on the solar panel up to the solar charge controller, and that way we're starting to throw power into the battery stack. So I'll do that as the next scene. So I've already got the solar panel I hauled out into the yard, and I just connected an extension cable onto it. It's still using those MC4 connections like I've been showing throughout the video. I'll just flip it over, and I'll take the MC4 connections that it has now and connect those up to the solar charge controller, yeah? Okay, and as you can see, nothing complex here. Just going to take the male end, plug it into the female, listen for the click, take the same again, the male end, plug it into the female. You'll hear that click. Normally that'll let you know. Sometimes the click's a little muted depending on, you know, where these things are at for connections, but it should light up now. I'll see, make sure they got power coming in. So yeah, I'm seeing 4.8 amps going into the batteries now, and going in at 26.9 volts, because that's actually, even though this is a 24 volt battery stack, the voltage is a little higher with the lithium iron phosphate. So I'll come in close and show you this just so you can see that it's taking a charge and all that happiness, yeah? Yeah, just kind of hold it on this angle, let the sun hit that screen so it's easier to see. This tells me how many kilowatt hours have gone into this battery so far, and then what the voltage of the battery is at, what the temperature is outside. Now this will be the voltage coming in off the solar panel there, 26.9 at 4.8 amps. So it gives you an idea of, you know, one way or the other, we now have that solar panel that's charging up this 24 volt battery stack, yeah? So one of the things I'll stop and mention here, I'll just kind of shift camera angles. One of the things I'll stop and mention here of this solar panel itself has a higher voltage to it. If you're running lower voltage solar panels, you may need to connect 2 together in series to get it up to a higher voltage, and that way it can work with the 24 volt batteries. If you try hooking on a low voltage solar panel, it doesn't always work out depending on the solar charge controllers and how intelligent they are and stuff, but it's always a safer bet to go with a higher voltage combination, whether you're hooking them together in series or whether you're using a higher voltage panel, generally speaking, just to be above that 26 volts or so that's the battery's going to need, so that way it can step it down and optimize it through the charge controller and all that, yeah? Like I say, I think there's a few charge controllers, I don't have any myself, that'll work with those lower voltage stepping up to the 24 volts, but it's just something to be mindful of if you want to build the system up from scratch, yeah? Okay, so now we'll come back over to the R600 there that ALLPOWERS makes, and all I'm going to do is take that XT60 connection that I had, and where you normally plug in the solar panels on this unit, because it has a voltage range between 12 and 60 volts, and it'll take 8.8 amps max, I can now hook on straight into that from the batteries, and it'll throw in power as though it was like a solar panel, but instead of drawing it from the solar panel, I've got it directly coming from the batteries, as you can see where I've connected here. So now what this allows, here, I'll just shift my camera angle back and kind of discuss this setup now, yeah? All right, so as you can see, there wasn't really a super complex setup to get this kind of wired up together, yeah? That what this allows though now is I have a solar generator system that's running at 24 volt based off of those batteries, which makes it that the wires, you know, diameter can be less and that kind of stuff, because the higher the voltage you draw, the less you have to pass the amps through those wires to reach the same levels of power. So in that regard, it's really good with this kind of setup where you can thin down your wires a bit if you're wanting to run them lengths and that kind of stuff. You don't get as many losses in the wires and all that kind of stuff. All in all, it's just good to have. But what it does for the solar generator now, this little R600 unit, is instead of being dependent on 300 watt hours as its maximum kind of depth, it now has the 2.5 kilowatts that are sitting in this battery stack that it can rely on. So now if I'm running any devices that are about 200 watts, 210 watts or so or less through this solar generator, I can run it in, you know, as really for an extended length of time before I'm going to fully hit those batteries and drain them down. Because like I say, the batteries themselves are larger than this entire generator, right? So what that allows though is I can really start to use this over an extended period of time where I'm not limited by this unit here only allows 220 watts of solar to go in. If I wanted to put on a second panel here and upgrade the solar charge controller and all that kind of stuff, I can scale those aspects of this system up so that they're feeding far greater amounts of power into these batteries to charge them up faster. And I'm not kind of bottlenecked by the 220 watts that are going in here. Where the bottlenecking is really kind of plays a factor is if on this unit I'm now running watts that are up above, you know, say anything up above about 200 watts, that what'll end up happening is I'm going to draw off the battery sitting in this faster than these batteries can charge this back up. So these batteries will continuously want to charge this, but can only do it at about 210 watts an hour. And so it's one of those things. But what it does do is it allows me to extend the life of this. If I am running, say, a 600 or 700 watt load, it allows it where this battery stack is going to constantly feed power in here, and even though this is drawing faster than this is filling it up, it'll extend the amount of time that I can actually use this unit before it'll want to shut down and power off. And I'll show an example of that as we go. I'm going to use this unit, which normally, like I say, normally you'd never be able to do any type of cooking or anything with a unit this small, but today we're going to make off some stir fry and I'm going to make myself a lunch out in my backyard. Yeah, so let me just go grab a couple other components and we'll move on to that stage of the video, and we'll start talking further through. I'll show you on the generator and stuff where you can see the exact amount of power flow and all that kind of stuff, so it'll all start to really make sense to you as we go. Yeah. Okay, so I had to do some shifting around. I had some kids set up right on the other side of my property doing lemonade yesterday, so I had to switch the video. So if you see a shift in the sun's shadows of where it's sitting on the ground, it's because we're in the next day. But one way or the other, I've turned around and done a basic setup here. I've just put out a little surface that I can set my induction cooker and that kind of stuff on. Yeah, other than that, everything else is pretty well the same. So my plan really is to cook off a stir fry this morning and show you guys, you know, using a little tiny unit like this R600, how we can still achieve being able to do this kind of functionality. Yeah, so I'll shift camera angles and we'll start to get on with the actual cooking of the food. Okay, so the first order of business, this is an induction cooker here, and it can go in varying degrees of power. So I can set it at 300, 500, 700, 1000 watts, that kind of thing, and it keeps stepping all the way up to like 1600 or something, right? But needless to say, I know that the inverter that sits inside this little R600 unit can handle up to close to about 700 before it wants to shut off. And I've done tests on that. In the previous video I kind of tested things out, but I've done fine granular level tests to see exactly where we're at with this, and I know this induction cooker should be able to, you know, this little unit should be able to handle running this. Yeah, so the first order of business, I'm just going to get a salad bowl that I picked up at the dollar store. It's just made out of metal, so I'm going to set that down on this unit and make sure my inverter's turned on and all that happiness, and it is. So the thinking really is I'm just going to turn on the AC power. It'll light up with the AC. I'm seeing that now where this unit's ready to go. And I know I can't really show you this. I'll come in, I'll try to get it where the sun's not shining on it, but it's hard to read this with the camera and stuff, but I'll just kind of walk through things. So needless to say, I've got a little cup of rice here, and I've got the exact equivalent of 3 cups of water, the exact same size as this cup here. And I'm just going to put the water in there, and then I'll take a temperature reading, and then I'll show you what time it is and how quickly this unit can bring that much water up to temperature where we get it up to the point where we're able to cook with it and that kind of stuff. So right now, in fact, I'll shift camera angles and come in for this, yeah? Okay, so right now, hopefully the camera's picking that up. It's 10:29, so I'll pretty well just call it 10:30 by the time I get this thing turned on and all that happiness. But I'm just gonna turn it on and bring it to 700 watts. And you can see how quickly that wanted to heat up. That was already made that metal hot. These things are extremely efficient units, yeah? And when it comes to, like I say, right now I'm running at 700 watts, and on the R600 I'm seeing it say 681, 682, and I know it can handle that. And we'll just take a temperature reading of the water. So it's at 25 degrees Celsius, 25.7, so 78.3 Fahrenheit, yeah? And then, like I say, that was at 10:30. And we'll show you just how quickly this thing can come up to speed. It's pretty impressive, really, for the little amount of power this uses. And my thinking really is, I'm going to want to turn around. I forgot to plug in the XT60s. So I know you're getting some shoddy camera work, but I'm just going to plug in that XT60 connection to make sure that there's flow going into the battery as well. And that way there's power going into the generator at the same time as there's power coming out of it, yeah, to slow down the process in which I'm drawing off that battery to extend the cooking time of this unit. That's the whole objective. And then once this comes up to temperature, which comes pretty rapidly, I'm already at 100 Fahrenheit, so 37.8. You know, and if I was using a larger unit, say like the R1500 or something, I'd be able to turn this up and accelerate the time even faster. You know, you obviously are using more power and all that kind of stuff, but what I'm going to do is, as soon as this comes up to temperature, I'm just going to quickly go and wash off this cup of rice and dump it into the bowl, yeah? But we're about, just want to kind of keep this all in camera, we're about 1 minute deep or so far. I'm already seeing 42 degrees Celsius. And what I find is, generally speaking, to have this much water, it'll come up to or near a boil in about 5-6 minutes, yeah? So I'll just pause it here and let this kind of come up to temperature. As you can see, we're already at 50 degrees Celsius, and I'll just quickly go off and wash this rice, and then I'll come back and get ready to dump it in the bowl, yeah? Okay, so I washed off that rice, just got it sitting there for a second, and it's 10:33, so we're 3 minutes deep now. And to give you an idea, we're already at 71 Celsius, so that's already hotter than I like to even have my coffee. If I was just doing off a single cup of coffee, so we're talking 160 Fahrenheit. If I was to do off a single cup of coffee, I would have already pulled that water off because it would have been too hot to use for the coffee, yeah? So one way or the other, I'm going to give it about 1 more minute, because like I say, it takes about 5 minutes to come up to temperature for the water, and then I'm just going to hammer the rice in there. And really I want to get above about 82 degrees Celsius if I can, and we're starting to get close. And generally speaking, anything above about 82, 83, stuff starts to cook. So I just want this water to come up as quick as I can to get to that point, yeah? Now, when it comes to, like I say, this R600 that I got sitting over here, what I found is I can use this from the point I press the power on button and get this thing going. I can use it for about 40 minutes roughly. It takes about 5-10 minutes to bring the liquids up to a boil, and then I can cook for about half an hour, just from previous tests I've done, yeah? So we're at 10:35 now, we're 5 minutes deep. And I'll just see, in my mind we're, yeah, 78.1, so one way or the other, in my mind we're already close enough. And like I say, I've already pre-washed off this rice, and I'll go put that stuff back into the house and let this just kind of cook now. As soon as this comes up to a point where I'm seeing bubbles starting to form, I'm going to drop the temperature down on this induction cooker, the amount of watts it's using, from 700 watt to 500 watt. I really want to conserve the energy to make it last as long as possible, yeah? So that'll be my thinking, really, is let me just go put this stuff away, kind of straighten up the scene, and we'll carry on with the video, yeah? Okay, now we're at 10:37, so 7 minutes into it, and we've already got this rice to the point where I'm seeing bubbles and that kind of stuff, and I know that the temperature's starting to rise up. Yeah, I'm already at 85.4, and that's on the surface. It'll be hotter down towards the metal because of the nature of the induction, but one way or the other, you can see I've got a simmer going. So I'm going to drop my power consumption now down to 500 watts. And I'll shift cameras and see if I can show you what it looks like on that screen. But now by dropping it down to the 500 watts, you can see I'm still getting a simmer and that kind of stuff happening, but it allows me to not hit the solar generator as hard and kind of stretch out the cooking time, yeah? So one way or the other, I'll kind of stop and shift camera angles and just show you what it looks like on that little induction screen. So I know, like I say, it's bright in the lighting, but hopefully you can see the 500. So like I say, I can, with this little tiny generator, I can adjust between 3, 5, and 700. And when I know that even at 500 watts that I'm sitting at a decent simmer coming out of this rice, I'll drop it down to the 300 and let it just kind of cook at temperature, yeah? But right now, we're at 10:39, so in less than 10 minutes deep, we're already fully cooking that rice, and the solar generator is still sitting above 50%. When it comes to the power that I've got on that. I'll stop and show you kind of a quick look at that as well, yeah? So, like I say, I know these little screens don't do well in the bright sun, but hopefully you guys can see that I've got 214 watts coming in. Now that's coming in off that battery stack, and that battery stack is taking a charge from that solar panel of close to the equivalent, yeah? And you'll see now with the watt output, it's now, because I've got it down on the lower power setting when it comes to this unit, it's now gonna draw 684 watts, but then it turns on and off, and it kind of does intermittent heating in order to get down to that 300 watts. So you're still using the inverter in this unit, pretty hard in that regard, but it's turning on and shutting off every couple seconds to give that lower power draw, to give you an idea of what's happening there. And you can see that I've still got 49% of the power sitting in this generator. And like I say, the 214 watts coming in isn't enough to recover the battery inside here, but it allows me to extend it out as long as possible, so I can kind of extend the ability to cook with this little tiny unit, right? I mean, like I say, normally speaking, with a unit this small, you'd never be cooking like I am with an induction cooker and stuff. It just wouldn't be possible normally. But in this kind of configuration, it allows me to pull that off. So if I was wanting to do really compact, low, cheaper end systems for off-grid use, you can see that I can successfully get to the point of being able to cook food with equipment that you normally wouldn't even think would be able to handle that task, yeah? So, and I'll just quickly come back to this solar charge controller we've got hooked up between the solar panel and this 24-volt battery stack. And as you can see, I'm taking in 4.9 amps at 26.7 volts. So one way or the other, I'm throwing charge into this battery stack independent of what's happening with the generator and the cooking and all that kind of stuff. It's one of those things where if I wanted to have it where I was using a larger solar panel array, and so I could get more rapid filling of these larger battery stacks, that's all achievable, and it's totally independent from the other system that we're using, the generator and the induction cooker and all that kind of stuff. They're almost like two totally independent systems. And if I wanted to have another unit, because I've only got two hooked onto the terminal here, if I owned like an R1500 or something, where I wanted to hook both of my solar generators up in this kind of construct at the same time, that's all possible. And then the limitation really lies in the solar charge controller and how much power it's able to throw into this battery stack. And then, like I say, you're just kind of distributing power from this main storage out to the different solar generators. Yeah, it's just kind of an alternative way to use these units and kind of amp the productivity that you'd get out of them. So we'll just come back to kind of where we're at with the rice and the cooking and all that business. So it's 10:44 now, so we're 14 minutes deep, and like I say, I've turned the power down, and I turned it right down to 300 watts to really kind of stretch out the longevity of the cook time. Here, I'll just shift that a little. But I'll take a temperature reading to show you that I'm still at 88.6 degrees Celsius. That's still hot enough to be cooking this food and getting it ready, yeah? And we're just trying to use really as little energy as possible to successfully pull off cooking a larger portion of food. And to give you an idea, in the previous testing I've done, I've cooked about 1.5 times this water with 1.5 times the rice. I'm going to throw in some vegetables and some chicken and that kind of stuff into it. When I've made this meal previously, I made enough food to feed 3 people off of what I've done. I've scaled it down right now because I don't have anybody else that wants to have a stir fry at 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, right? But one way or the other, it'll show the functionality of what we're achieving, yeah? But as you can see, I've already successfully been cooking for a 10-minute period now. So I'll cut back in a few minutes when this rice is a little further along though, yeah? So I kind of stepped the camera back just to show you the complete setup, yeah? So it's one of those things where I could easily have my cooking and generator and that stuff sitting inside a walled tent environment. I could easily have the batteries in an external environment if I wanted to, and then run extension lines from the solar panels out. I barely have the solar panels stretched out. I could easily move them way off into the neighbor's yard, and I could move this setup a little further away from the core battery stack and all that kind of stuff. But it shows you an idea. If I was using this in, say, like a walled tent or an ice shelter or that kind of environment, it's easy enough to have all this stuff sitting inside with the kitchen environment and have the other components, you know, kind of just externalized, where that stuff was just all sitting out in the field and that kind of stuff separate from the shelter, yeah? And it's easy enough to run, you know, longer extension lines on these higher voltage panels without worrying about too much loss and that kind of stuff. But like I say, this rice normally takes about 15 to 20 minutes to cook, just given the nature of the rice and what type of rice it is. So I'll just let this cook for a few more minutes, and then I'll add in some veggies and meat so I can kind of finish my meal up, get some sauces in there and all that kind of happiness, yeah? Okay, I don't know if the camera's picking that up at all, but I can see that, you know, the solar input to the XT60 there, I'm still throwing in 215 watts off the primary stack, still bouncing between 0 and 685 watts when it comes to the induction cooker as it turns on and off, and I'm down to about 39% power on the solar generator, yeah? And we'll just kind of shift here, shift to this angle and do a temperature reading. This rice has been about 15 minutes now, and you can see, hopefully you're seeing that, we're at 92.2 Celsius, so that is hot enough for it's going to cook the food. Let's get the... So 188.1 Fahrenheit, so 86.7 Celsius. And I'm occasionally stirring it. I'll give it about another 4 or 5 minutes, and then the rice should be softened up enough where I can start to add in some veggies. I'm just going to pull some frozen veggies and some meat out of the freezer that I got, some chicken strips and that kind of stuff, and toss them in, eh? But if you were out in the field, you know, having a handful of rice, harvesting some wild edibles off the land, and then potentially throwing in a bit of squirrel or something like that, and you could easily have yourself, you know, a decent meal, yeah? You know, if you put in some spices and that kind of stuff, and if you don't have that, you're close to salt water, add in a splash of salt water just to get some kind of extra flavoring to the meal, you know. And if you're lucky enough to have soy and that kind of stuff in your off-grid location, well, you know, all the better, right? So like I say, one way or the other, I'll just go and start to grab the meat and the veggies and that kind of stuff and get ready to add it in, yeah? All right, so we're now at 10:55. So I've given it a fair amount of time for that rice to simmer and that kind of stuff, yeah? And then I'm gonna call that about 20 minutes for the cooking of that rice. So I'm going with the premise of, I mean, it'll still cook over the next couple minutes, but I'm just gonna turn around and get, like I say, just some frozen veggies. And I've got a bunch of chicken, so I'm not gonna be chintzy with it. Just drop that all in, kind of give it a stir, and I'm gonna turn the heat back up a little bit, just for a minute, because I know I added in that frozen veggies and stuff. That'll drop the temperature of this, yeah? But I can see the rice is already starting to take up the remaining part of the moisture in the container and that kind of stuff, yeah? And normally when I'm doing this kind of cooking, And I really want that moisture to just kind of cook off from the vegetables entirely, right? I don't want it to be like a soup, so generally speaking, what I'll end up doing, and as you can see, nothing fancy, right? As soon as I see this starting to bubble off again, I'll drop the temperature back down, and then I'll just go grab some sauces that I'm going to add into this, yeah? Make sure you get every little bit of chicken, because, you know, waste not, want not. But like I say, if you were out in the field and you had some starches, you know, that kind of thing, where you were able to harvest some edible plants off the landscape and stuff, even if you weren't successfully grabbing a, you know, nabbing a squirrel or a rabbit or any of that kind of stuff, any small game that you were catching with your traps or any of that business, you could still kind of sustain yourself with simple meals that were just, you know, a pot of slop, if you will. That's what I normally refer to this kind of stuff as, of you just take whatever you harvest off the land and anything you brought with you and kind of, you know, make the best of it, if you will. But I can see that we're almost back up to the point where it's going to start bubbling again, and I've got about 30% left on this R600, so that's okay. We're just going to cook this meal off right down to the point that this solar generator shuts off, to show you kind of the longevity of the cook time and all that business, yeah? And like I say, right now we're coming up close to the half-hour mark where it's 10:57. We started this at 10:30, yeah? So realistically, I think I got about 10-12 minutes left. I'm back up to the point where I'm starting to see bubbles coming out again. So I know I've kind of taken the edge off the ice that was in the frozen veggies. And now I'm just going to drop the temperature back down and let it do that slow simmer to get as long of a cooking time as possible, yeah? And I'll take one more reading. And yeah, the temperature dropped a little bit. So, but as you can see, hopefully you're seeing that, we're still at 77.4. So one way or the other, it'll kind of come up to temperature, but you know, if I want, I can turn it back up for another minute or so, just to really make sure I see a solid simmer and that kind of stuff. But we're trying to optimize the amount of energy we're using and the ease of pull off of this solar generator, while still achieving the, you know, what we're wanting to achieve here, yeah? So, like I say, I'll just stop the camera at this point in time, run to the house and grab some soy and some other sauces I want in here, because, you know, I like my stir fries with a lot of flavor and that kind of thing, right? We're at the 11 o'clock mark now. So this has been cooking for 25 minutes now at a slow simmer. And like I say, I've just got some dark soy, add a decent splash of that in there. Just going to add in some flavors and sauces. And like I say, if I was out in the field, I'm going to add in a bit of Szechuan sauce, because I like that kind of stuff, and I'm not shy with it. And then I'm going to add in a little bit of Frank's Red Hot, because, you know, I put that on everything, right? Just like the commercial says. And like I say, if I was out in the field and I didn't have all these kind of flavors and stuff, I would look at using potentially like spruce tips, you know, to give like a lemony flavor. They've got a really kind of citrus flavor, so I could add those in for a few minutes and then just pull them out, and it'll give more of like a lemon zing. And if I turn around and if I was near the ocean, I could easily throw in a bit of salt water and let that kind of add a bit of salt to the, you know, the flavor of the meal, without having to turn around and package salt along and that kind of stuff. And like I say, we're down to 27% on the solar generator, but because I just added in all those sauces, I'll bring it back up to 700. And that's the nice part, with even with a unit this small, I can toggle between the 3, 5, and 7. And it's really, the 7 will give me non-stop, where it'll constantly start to boil. The 5 will be intermittent, where it's about 2/3 of the time. And the 300 watts is about half the time it'll add additional heat in. So it gives me that kind of granular level control, yeah, when it comes to things. But that's the thinking, really, of now, even when this solar generator, quote unquote, reaches the point where I'm not able to cook with it anymore because I've run out of power, it's just drawn down too much of the solar generator. It's not the end of the use of the solar generator, it's just the limit that I have in my cooking. because I'm constantly throwing that 215 watts from the battery stack into there, you know, once I stop cooking, if I want to run some USB lights or I want to charge my devices and all that kind of stuff, I can still do that. I'm just going to drop this back down again because we're starting to get a decent boil into it. I could still run all those devices. You know, I could be charging up tablets and cell phones and all that kind of stuff. Most of those draw very little power. You know, I could charge up, I could have a cell phone sitting on the top and be running off of both of those USB outputs, you know, one to run a light and one to, you know, charge a tablet or something, and I'm still not going to be pulling nearly as much off of that little R600 as this battery stack would be putting into it. I'm just limited with the fact of I'm only going to be able to cook again in about 2 hours time, because that's roughly how long it's going to take once this R600 gets drawn down. I have to let the battery stack fill it back up to 100% again before I can turn around and cook again. So, you know, I cook a meal this size, which to me, this is a generous portion for somebody my size. I'm 230 pound guy, 220, 230 pounds. This is going to be a generous portion of food for me. And like I say, I'll be able to turn around and cook another meal off once this fully recharges back up again in about 2 hours. So I just can't cook meal after meal after meal, you know. And even if I feel like the meal I'm cooking here didn't fully get to the point I wanted it to, it's easy enough to let it sit, cool down for a bit, and then just bring it back into a little boil and cook it off later. You know, there is kind of flexibility in that regard. But like I say, when this does run out of power, it's not the end of the show. I'm still, it's just running out of the higher volumes of power that I would need to cook with. You know, I'm still easily able to turn around and charge my devices and stuff. And like I say, we're now at the point where we're at about half an hour of this meal cooking, and I'm sitting at 26% on the solar generator. But my thinking really is I'm just going to keep cooking this and running the time to show you guys exactly how long I can cook at this degree, until this generator just says, you know what, we're not cooking anymore. Yeah. So I'll stop the camera because time will just pass, and I'll go put my sauces away, and I'll let this just slowly simmer in its own juices at this point in time until the end of the generator's cooking ability. (94.2 Celsius). The neighbors are all starting to get going now, so you're going to hear noise, but 201.6 Fahrenheit. And this is on the 300 watt setting. You know, once this has come up to temperature, you can use very, very little amounts of power to be able to, you know, just kind of keep this going, yeah? And to give you an idea, I'm now at 11:09. Just give it a bit of stir. And that's generally speaking what I would end up doing with something like this, where, yeah, you're still going to have a bit of moisture into it and stuff, but if you're using this off-grid, you're wanting to get liquids into you as much as you are food, yeah? So to have moist meals like this, to me, isn't a problem. I'm used to it, so I don't mind having, you know, a lot of moisture. It's not restaurant stuff, right? I'm trying to show you guys kind of really efficient ways to do off-grid cooking in very constrained environments, yeah? Where if you were using this off-grid and you were wanting to really minimize your energy use, to give you an idea, this whole thing is being sustained off of a 200 watt panel as we move through time. You know, I'd want to switch up to having, say, 400 watts or something going into that main battery stack, just so I wasn't kind of pressed. But I could easily cook off 2 meals a day, you know. And the nice part is, because this battery stack is so huge, this little solar generator only holds 300 watts, right? So that single battery stack can fill that up, what, like 10-15 times or something. I don't know what the math is. It's 300 goes into 2500, what, 8 times or something? It's ridiculous the amount that battery stack can refill this little solar generator and kind of keep it going. So it gives you multiple days where even if you had cloudy conditions for a day or two, you'd still be able to kind of cook a meal off pretty well every day without it being an issue, you know, unless you had just brutal weather for weeks on end and that kind of stuff and weren't seeing the sun. But it's one of those things of just having the depth of the battery stack augmenting this R600 really helps take it to the next level, yeah? And like I say, I know it's really difficult to see the screens, but try to get in as close as I can. You can see I'm still taking in that 214, and it's going between the 0 watts and 685 watts, and we're still at 23% of the battery power. And normally what I find is when this gets down to about 15-20% or so, it'll want to shut off on its own accord. But normally I run it at 500 watts instead of 3 because I really wanted to extend out the cooking time here. But you can see the watts out, it jumps and then drops, right? And that's really just making it that this unit has more time to cool down and all that kind of stuff, you know, without having any issues. And then really stretches out the cooking time with that 300 watt. But you can see I've got multiple, here, sorry, shift you back down. You can see I'm still seeing a good solid bubbling going on in there, even with the 300 watts, you know. And we're now at 11:15, so this has been cooking for 40 minutes in this pot to be at the point we're at without any issues, right? I'm not overheating the unit or anything because I'm primarily running at 300. If I'm running it at 500 is my kind of lowest option setting. What I find is, I'll just stir this a bit. What I find is the unit will want to overheat a bit, and it'll start to throw warnings that, hey, the temperature of the unit's getting high. But if you're down on the 300, I'm not seeing those high temperature warnings and all that kind of stuff, yeah? But to me, this is already getting overcooked at this point in time. But like I say, one way or the other, I just want to show you guys the full length of time that I could potentially cook. And if there was a bit more food in here, you wanted to feed more people, you could easily feed 2 people, you know, large portion meals, 3 people a regular size meal, and 4 people would be, you know, a smaller size meal, right? That you'd be able to kind of run off of this. But like I say, once this generator runs down, in 2 hours time when it fills back up, you're able to do this whole thing again, right? So you could easily have it where, you know, you're cooking throughout the day kind of thing, right? And when it comes to, if I want to make myself off a coffee or something, and it's like I've stated in previous videos, quite often when I go off-grid, I'll bring a combination of freeze-dried coffee, sugar, coffee whitener, and hot chocolate all pre-mixed the way I like it. And for me to make off a hot coffee takes about 15% of the battery capacity, and takes about 5 minutes to do, to get the water hot enough for a cup of coffee and that kind of stuff. So, you know, I can make myself coffees and cook meals and that kind of stuff as I go through the day without it really being overly taxing on my system at all with a system to this size, right? Okay, so we're at 11:20 now. And I'm actually starting to get a little concerned about the fact of this whole stir fry is starting to get pretty dried out, if you will, from being overcooked. But it gives you an idea of, like, you know, all the surplus water is pretty well been cooked off now. And I'm starting to stick to the bottom of the bowl now because it's just been cooking for too long. But I'll take a nice big bite here. Let it cool down for a second, I'll tell you. Yeah, the rice is starting to get overcooked where it's starting to get super soft, yeah. But hopefully that gives you an idea of, you know, it's steaming and all that happiness. But one way or the other, I just want to make sure it's not getting too stuck to the bottom here. But hopefully that gives you an idea of kind of the level of capacity I'm able to do this at. And like I say, we're well overcooked now. And I should be reaching the point where the solar generator is at 20% now. So I should be reaching the point, I'm just letting it cool down, should be reaching the point where it wants to turn this inverter off pretty soon. But yeah, I'm getting hot enough to just scald the mouth out of me. But the honest reality is, normally I would have already pulled this off now. I would have pulled it off 10-15 minutes ago probably. But I just really wanted to show the longevity of the cooking that we can do, right? And I went with water and rice and that kind of stuff, you know, doing a stir fry as the example. Water has the highest BTU rating for most foods you're gonna cook and eat with and that kind of stuff. So boiling off large amounts of water and using that as the example is kind of a worst case scenario. If I was just throwing some meat and veg into here and wasn't boiling off any water, or just put in a splash of water so things didn't stick to the pan, you could have easily cooked off in half the time that I have, right? If I had a squirrel and some wild edibles from the terrain and just wanted to kind of cook those off and mix them up, you know, we're talking 20 minutes, 25 minutes, that kind of thing, right? And right now we're pushing to the point where this unit's been on for almost an hour now. You know, we're at 11:22, and if I remember correctly, I started at 10:30, and I'm down to 19%. So, you know, when you're running at the 300 watts on this induction cooker, I can get closer to a full hour's cook time. If I'm running at the 500 watts, it's down closer to about 40-45 minutes, and if I'm running at the 700 watts, I'm only going to be able to get about 30 minutes or so, give or take, you know, because the slower I draw off this and kind of the slower I cook with this, it just gives more time for that battery stack to throw additional power into the solar generator. So, you know, you're not cooking off roasts or any of that kind of stuff in this kind of construct, but it's easily enough I could cook just the same as I would on a stovetop at home, right? And that to me is one of the critical parts of, you know, you get back into the familiarity of the cooking you're used to doing, yeah? See, and like I say, I'm at 11:25 now, and I'm already starting to see a bit of smoke and stuff, or stuff is starting to burn on the bottom of the pan, right? That's not the kind of objective I'm wanting to achieve, so I'm going to stop this regardless at this point in time, just so I don't ruin the food by overcooking it too much and having it that it's a bigger job to clean off that pot. But it's now, I simply just shut off this unit for the you know, the power, and immediately this solar generator now, I'll stop and kind of go through this. You can see, I'll shift you over here. So I'm down to 18%. Hopefully you're seeing that on this unit. And I'm starting to take a lower battery pull in from the battery stack, because the batteries in the solar generator are starting to drop off, yeah? So, but one way or the other, I can easily turn around. I'll just take my phone. Should be able to get the wireless charging. There, hopefully you heard the bing there. That easily I'm still able to just turn around and charge my phone and that kind of stuff. It doesn't need much of a charge, so I'm seeing where it's taking in 6 watts, or outputting 6 watts to charge my phone, but I'm still taking in 157 watts, yeah? So even though I've lost the ability to be cooking, I still have capacity in this battery to be able to run lighting systems or charge devices and that kind of stuff, because the battery stack is just going to keep charging this up. And like I say, the only real limitation at this point in time is in the hour and a half, 2 hours it'll take for the battery stack to fill this back up to 100%, and I'm ready to cook off a full-scale meal again. So hopefully that gives you a good example of, you know, the hackery that you can do if you're off grid to try to take these little solar generators. You know, it's expensive getting the big ones, right? You know, yeah, they got 3,000 watt inverters in them and all this and that, and, you know, good capacity and everything, but they're super expensive. You know, a unit like this is what, about $400, $350, $400, somewhere in around that range. You know, this is all time sensitive stuff, right? But one way or the other, it's only a cheaper unit compared to the larger solar, you know, generators that you can get that are on the market. And having the ability, the one thing I really like about these ALLPOWERS units is that XT60 connection with a wide range of voltage intake. It allows it where I can do things like this and really amp the performance of simple small devices, you know. As far as I know it to be, the R1500 has the same kind of XT60 connection for the solar and all that kind of stuff. You know, it's easy enough to turn around and swap out this generator if I go up to a bigger scale one, and then just be able to do even more, you know, powerful cooking and all that kind of stuff, yeah? And there is devices like I showed earlier in the video where I just did terminal connections out to those XT60 connections. I can do cigarette lighter adapters out to the XT60 connections as well. So if I did turn around and have, say, the ALLPOWERS R1500 or something, where I'm plugging in my battery stack into that through its XT60 connection, I could easily come out of that cigarette lighter output and input it into this device and daisy chain them together so that they're all kind of hooked back up to that battery stack, and it's all just flowing from the solar panel through that battery stack out to multiple generators potentially, where I'm just daisy chaining them along. And then I just got to be mindful of how much power am I drawing off those devices, you know, in relationship to how fast power is able to flow back into them. And you can turn around and set up, you know, multiple cheaper generator systems like this and really have advanced functionality in an off-grid environment where, you know, you've got multiple powers sitting all over your location, where it's not a, you know, it's not breaking the bank to do. You know, to give you an idea, this R600 in combination with this battery stack, you know, and this entire setup is, you know, it doesn't perform quite as good as it would if you bought a, say, a $3,500 unit that has a 2,000 watt inverter in it and that kind of thing, you know. But it's good in the regards of I can easily hook onto that battery stack and go off to other devices other than the solar generator. I could hook on like buck converters like I've shown in previous videos and drop it down to 12 volt and kick out the cigarette lighters. There's a lot of flexibility that you can do with this kind of mindset, you know, but I just wanted to show that, you know, this example in this video, yeah, and hopefully you guys enjoyed. So I'll stop now and I'll kind of give some wrap-up comments and eat my brunch here and wrap up this video. Okay, so, and as part of some of the closing comments now, I'll just talk about the battery stack itself. So those are Bluetooth batteries that I've got hooked up there, and you can see now it's taken in charge from the solar panel, but it's also charging up that R600 at the same time. And you can see it's really gentle on the batteries, because the solar is just kind of flowing through that battery stack and out to there. I'm not seeing huge draws on those batteries or anything else as we go through time, yeah. But as soon as this R600 is full up, then the batteries will make sure that they're filled up. And you can see with all that cooking and everything else, I started these batteries off at 100%. Here, I'll just switch to the other one. Because they're hooked in series, they can kind of go out of whack from each other and you got to balance them every now and again. But yeah, you can see I'm a little bit behind in this one, but very, very gentle on the power usage, because really what's happening is, like I say, these solar panels are charging and it's flowing through these batteries, but because this R600 unit is taking the draw to bring it back up to fully charged again, it's making it that these batteries for the battery stack aren't getting hammered hard. It's really, really gentle on them. And one of the golden rules when it comes to all this stuff is the more gentle the charge is on batteries and all that kind of stuff, the longevity of them will just last longer. Now, these are all using lithium iron phosphate batteries. I can use all of these and drive them from full to dead every day for over the next 10 years of daily use, and they're going to have about 80% of the capacity still left in the battery at that point in time 10 years down the road. And if I'm driving these really gently and I'm making sure that I'm not, you know, hammering the batteries as hard as possible, you know, even when it comes to the XT60 connection going in here, if I plug this into the wall, it would want to charge up closer to 300 to 400 watts, and the battery capacity in there is only with 300 watt hour battery. That's really charging that battery fast. By charging it with this XT60 connection at the 215 watts or 210 watts in, you know, that range, it's gentler on that battery. It just makes it last longer and that kind of thing, yeah. So it's one of those things of, hopefully it gives you guys a good idea of how you could easily scale out systems now in an off-grid environment and have it that I could use all this stuff. I mean, realistically, I'm getting old now. Most of this stuff will probably last until I'm dead. I'd probably, if I was off-grid, I'd want to switch out the flexible solar panel and go with more like a long-term, you know, rigid glass one like I use for my home. You know, if I was, you know, wanting to set up this kind of permanent off-grid camp and that kind of thing, I'd want to go with the more durable panels in that regard. You know, I like using these flexies for temporary setups and short-term stuff. But, you know, if I wanted to go longevity, most of this stuff would last until I'm dead, before it would lose its functionality entirely. You know, there's probably some electric component inside that solar generator that would give before the battery technology itself would end up dying, yeah. But like I say, I'm going to wrap it up at this point in time. That was the heart of this video, was For one, I wanted to show you guys kind of 24 volt systems and how easy it was to kind of adjust and step up to running the higher voltage to save on wiring costs and make it more efficient and that kind of stuff. And for two, to show people of, yes, with things like the ALLPOWERS where it has that XT60 connection with the wide voltage range of input, and how easy it is to kind of really expand the functionality of what you could do with this. You know, when I do just the raw review video of this, I wasn't even able to plug in 12 volt cooking devices and this kind of stuff, but you can see with some subtle modifications, I'm able to turn this into an extremely powerful unit where I'm being able to cook off substantial amounts of food over time. Yeah, but I'm gonna keep the flies out of my stuff. But I'm going to wrap this video up at this point in time, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this content. I'm eager to eat this food now, but hopefully you guys enjoyed this type of content, and if you did, like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for watching, all that kind of happiness, and enjoy your day until the next video. Yes.